Good day, everyone. Welcome to the SparkPlugs webinar series. Today, we're going to be covering the hidden costs of bad email data with our partners, DataValidation.com. We're excited to have these guys as partners, and we really believe in the service that they provide. So let me go ahead and introduce. My name is Ryan Reichen. I'm the Senior Eloquent Marketing Consultant at Sureshot Media and Marketing. We are the parent company of SparkPlugs. I will be moderating this session, and our presenter today is Mike Marion. He's the founder and CEO of DataValidation.com. Today's webinar, our goal is to be between 30 and 40 minutes in length. We know that it's important to keep things short as we value your guys' time, and so our goal is to make sure we get the information across in as compact a way as we can. If you have any questions, feel free to enter them into the questions box. We will be taking questions and answering them towards the end of this webinar. And so moving forward, I'm actually going to go ahead and I am going to turn the presentation over to Mike.
Hey everybody. Okay, let's just get my screen up here. And 1 second. Okay, we should be live now.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, so as you were saying, we're going to cover as the main theme basically the hidden cost of bad email data, and it's a subject that's been very talked about in the last couple of years, but it's still sort of an uphill battle to get people to really properly understand it and do something about it. So we're going to try to do that here in a brief period of time at a high level, and then afterwards, please feel free to follow up with questions during this presentation, as well as you can contact us through email and on our Twitter account, and we'd love to interact with you. So what is data quality is the first question we really need to answer, and that's a very large term. I like this definition where it kind of covers the different things you should be thinking about when you consider the question of data quality, and I've bolded the ones that I think are the most important, and I think that we do a very good job at answering with our product, data validation. But it's basically the question of accuracy, integrity, consistency, completeness, validity, and timeliness and accessibility of your data. And if you really think about what your business is and the data flowing into it, and you kind of analyze that, you'll see that having these aspects be present is very important to your day-to-day business. Having accurate data that's complete, it's valid, and having that data in a timely fashion, the faster you have access to that data and it is complete in quality, in its character, the better off you're going to be. And we believe that email validation is a very integral piece of that. So you have to make sure that every email lead that's coming into your organization is going to be top-notch and is going to be of absolute quality. And we'll see why in just a second. So let's cover it at a high level, just the sources of bad data, and we're going to see how these sources of bad data impact your bottom line. The first source of bad data is just user error. If anybody is collecting data on a web form or any other sort of interaction where the user has the ability to enter data, there's always going to be the chance for user error. The second is employee error. Whenever you're dealing with a CRM system or any system where employees or sales professionals can manipulate data, there is a possibility for there to be an error on the employee's part, whether it's at a POS system that feeds data in, or whether, like I said, it's a CRM, there's always that possibility. The third is anytime you purchase data, there's a big unknown when it comes to purchase data, so that's a big question mark there. And then, of course, there's old and stale data, and that's just the fact that things degrade in time, and we'll explore that in a little bit. And the last but not least in a lot of cases is just malicious intent. Sometimes people are just trying to feed you bad email data, and you need to look at that and how you can address that. So the first one is, like I said, user error, and to make mistakes is human, as all of our great politicians have shown us, and 25% of all data quality problems are caused by user error, which means that if you take your entire list or database that you're generating from your website and you look at all the data quality issues with that list, at least 25% of that is caused by simple typos or other user-related errors. The other side of this coin, like we talked about, was the employee error. And 75% of data quality issues within a system are caused by employee error. Again, typos or not following a process or whatever it might be. The overall cost of this bad data that's entering your system through some sort of error, whether it's employee or whether it's user generated, is more than $600 billion each year to U.S. businesses, and that's a phenomenal number. It's a very staggering number to think about, that a typo or a process that doesn't get followed can cost a business that much. The second is, that we really need to address is the idea of purchasing data. And there's a saying that fool me once, shame on you; fool me twice, shame on me. Or as George Bush said, you can't fool me twice. Once you get burned once, you get burned. And buying an unvalidated list or an unvalidated piece of data is the quickest way to ruin your data quality. Lead generation companies get paid per lead, and they don't get paid necessarily for results. So anytime you're buying any sort of incoming traffic, or you're dealing with some sort of affiliate that's getting paid on a lead and not necessarily on the outcome, you're left to deal with the aftermath. And that's a big issue out there in the industry. And you may not be directly purchasing data at this point, but you do want to analyze all your data sources and find out, okay, which are the ones that offload data into my system, and then basically there's a disconnect, so there's no repercussions. And those are the ones where you have the highest chance of having negative impact, because there is no feedback loop, there is no consequence to them for providing that bad information. There's an old saying that only entropy comes easy, or only chaos comes easy, and that's basically to say that, for those of you who are familiar, and I think most of us are, with the entropy principle, is that all things tend towards chaos, and data, like anything else, tends towards disarray. So as time goes on, your data becomes more and more chaotic and more decayed. As a matter of fact, in a period of 2 years, an email address by users changed over 40% of the time of those users changed that email address. So if you think about that, that's a phenomenal number to consider, that if you had a list of 100,000, let's say, that you're working with, 2 years from now, 40% of that 40,000 contacts are no longer valid anymore. And up to 15% change that contact information more than one time a year. So there's a huge decay, or a huge entropy principle that you have to think about. And basically all you need to remember is that as time progresses, the more time from the point that a lead signs up into your system, or the point that that lead has been validated, so whatever that date stamp is, as that gap of time gets bigger, the decay of that data gets greater and greater. And so on average, 25 to 33% of email addresses become outdated every single year. And that's just a very quick thing that you can do to gauge the data quality of your current database or internal list, is run a report and find out how many or what percentage of your data is 3 months old, or 6 months old, or 12 months old. And then also, what's the last time you had definitive contact? What's the last time that you had an open email from them, or a telephone, something that proves that data is still valid. And if you see a large amount being over 3 months, 6 months, or 12 months, there's a very good possibility that 25 to 33% of your list is actually no longer accurate, and you want to consider that. And then the last one that we talked about in terms of sources is the malicious intent. And some guys are just crooks out there. In the marketing world, unfortunately, there are a lot of great, reputable companies to work with, but there's a lot of them that don't care about doing things ethically, that will feed in bad data from an affiliate standpoint or whatever that might be. There's also the chance of a malicious competitor or just somebody on the internet who sees your website and decides it'd be really fun to do something malicious to these people. That's always a possibility. You want to keep that in mind. If you ever see big spikes in invalid data coming in, if you're using our validation solution, or you just see your delivery rates completely drop from one month to the other, there's a chance that you're being victimized, either by bad business practices or potentially by just somebody with malicious intent who is doing this for whatever reason. So keep that in the back of your mind as a potential source of this bad data. So let's talk a little bit about the impacts of this bad data coming in, this bad email data. I know probably a lot of you are sales professionals or related to that. So let's talk about the sales impact, because there's only so much you can do with bad email data. I always like to tell people when they ask me, to sum up sort of the impact or the problem with bad email data, is I ask them, okay, what's the open rate or the delivery rate for an email address that doesn't exist? And it sounds like a ridiculous question, but the answer is always going to be 0. And so if a huge percent of your list or a significant percent of your list is no longer accurate, your ability to do anything with that is absolutely 0. But you're gauging yourself against that without even knowing it. So what is the sales impact? And well, in sales, there's never any time to spare. You never have time to just sit around. You're always trying to, there's that great line of, in sales, you got to always be ABC, right? Always be closing. So if you're conducting lead generation activities without cleaning your data, you're wasting 27.3% of each sales rep's time on average. Basically, like we said, 25 to 35% of the data is going to be stagnant or stale within a year. Well, if you don't do anything about that, on average, and this is done on a survey of, I think, 3,000 companies, 27.3% of the time a sales rep is investing into that list, whether it's emailing or whatever it might be, is going to be wasted. And that adds up to 546 hours per year for a full-time employee. And that's just a phenomenal number, 546 hours. So we're going to do a little math in this webinar, and bear with me. I'm going to try to go as fast as I can without losing anybody, and then we'll leave time for questions. I know everybody's time is valuable, so I'm going to do a little math and just keep some of these numbers in the back of your mind, and I'll remind you as we go on. So, okay, the math part of it. So if the average sales salary is $75,000 and the time wasted is 27.3%, that 546 hours, let's assume that we've got a lifetime value for a customer that we acquire. So that's the amount of money we can see from this customer over the lifetime that we have them after the acquisition. And let's assume that our sales professional is getting half a sale an hour. They're a relatively effective sales professional, or maybe this is whatever the scenario might be. These are not entirely accurate numbers necessarily. They're much more meant to be good for visualization, and you guys can use this afterwards to plug in your own numbers and get some ideas of where you are and what the impact is to your business. But if we take that average salary and we multiply it by the percentage of time wasted, the lost revenue alone is $20,920 because the bad data is in the list. And if we want to look at the opportunity cost, we can take the amount of sales that we would be doing. In this case, we have it kind of marked as sales per hour, but you could do it by just calculating conversion rate and how many leads you'd be touching within a day or a month or whatever it might be. And we take that and we multiply it by the time wasted. We're basically going to get what our potential losses are from not closing those deals. And then we take the lifetime value of if we had gotten those deals, what does that look like? And that's $27,300 for this scenario that's being wasted because of that bad data that's infiltrated the list. So those are some really interesting numbers to think about in terms of sales activity and bad data in there. So let's talk a little bit about the marketing impact, which is for email. It's much easier to calculate, and it really hits close to home into the bottom line. Bad emails cost your organization a lot of money. That's just a fact that you need to come to terms with and understand, and it's very easy to overlook. Most organizations are not aware of it, or if they are aware that there's an impact, they haven't really quantified it. So here's the hard truth that we need to kind of get our heads around. 23% of marketers or organizations that engage in online marketing have bounce rates over 10%. And 77% obviously have bounce rates up to 10%. The averages in different industries will vary, but most industries, even the better ones, are in the 2 to 3%. We see averages anywhere from 5 to 7%, and we do see outliers of even 10 to 15%. But 100% of all marketers, and this is really key to understand, 100% of every person who engages in email marketing has bounces that their email system isn't catching after the first delivery. And a great example of this would be a client who we did a test for, a major telecom company, cellular telecom company that sent in a file that said, this is our file, we've been mailing this on a regular basis, it's a very clean file, it's only got a 1.3% bounce rate. And we ran the file, gave it back to them and said, well, our system says that you've got a 5.8% invalid rate on your file. And they said, that's impossible. They went back, they looked at it, and they realized their system wasn't catching that gap between their 1.3 to our 5.8, and that really it was 5.8. But the bounce system, because of the fact that different ISPs report bounces differently and the technical implementations are so different, the bounce system that they had in place wasn't catching it. So you can imagine for a major telecom carrier, just those 4% that they are losing on bounces has a huge financial impact. So they were just shocked to see that. So remember that you're going to fall into one of these categories below 10% or above 10%, but irregardless of which one you fall into, there are invalid emails that you're just not aware of, no matter how efficient you are. The second thing you really need to be aware of, and another hard truth, is that in email marketing, there's no free rides, there's no free lunch, and ISPs have become more and more stringent about their bounce policy, and the bounce rate has become more and more of an indicator of whether or not your email is going to get delivered. Most email service providers, so this is not the internet service provider, not Gmail or Yahoo, but your email service providers like MailChimp or Silverpop or Constant Contact will deny you as a client if your rate ever touches 5%. They'll literally just ask you to go find another provider. And that percentage that is acceptable is getting lower and lower because you're basically renting their infrastructure to send out your emails, and if your bad practices are deteriorating their reputation, it's going to impact their entire business model. major ISPs like Yahoo and AOL and Gmail will begin degrading your inbox delivery if you have bounce rates as low as 1%. What that means is that your email will still get delivered, but whether it goes into the inbox or into the spam folder is going to be decided in large part by how many invalid email addresses you have. And the logic that they're using here, and statistically it is accurate, is that the larger the percentage of bounced emails, the percentage of bad emails that you send to them, the higher indication that either you have purchased that list and you haven't actually had double opt-in or proper single opt-in signups, and also the higher the chance that the marketing practices you're engaging in are not done properly. So that's a key indicator for them. Once you go above 1%, if you get into the 2 and the 3%, you start running the risk of getting throttled and maybe not even getting your email delivered at all to that particular ISP. So whenever we see somebody who has a bounce rate of 3% and they say, well, that's perfectly fine, we always tell them, you need to consider that at some point on a particular ISP, you'll hit that threshold and it'll affect your delivery. And if you're a B2C especially, the impact of not being able to deliver email properly to an ISP like Yahoo or AOL or Gmail that make up huge amounts of the market share can be devastating. So let's talk about sort of the math behind just delivering bad emails, because to a large extent, when people say, email is cheap, I don't need to worry about this, they're right, but they don't look at the whole picture. So delivering a bad email just in itself is not necessarily that expensive. If we use a list size of 100,000 as an example, and we used a CPM cost, so that's basically a cost per thousand of $10 to use an ESP like MailChimp or Silverpop or pick whoever you work with, and we assume a bounce rate of 10%, which is relatively high, but not unheard of for most people who have no deliverability sort of validation solution in place. We do the math, we crunch the numbers, and we find out it costs me $100 to mail my list, and $100 represents that 10% that isn't going anywhere. And most organizations, big or small, are going to kind of scoff at this number and say, okay, well, that's not a big deal. I will say two things. It isn't a big deal, although money's money, and if you can conserve it, you should. And it's generally not going to be enough to justify purchasing a validation solution like ours just for that $100. Although, if we look at the fact there is a large percentage of bounces that never get caught, there's a significant amount of this $100 that you will be paying every time you email out your campaign. So just conceptualize that if you email your clients 4 times a month and it's costing you, half of the bounces are uncaught, $50, there's a $200 a month penalty that you're paying just for pressing that send button. And that's a significant amount of money over the course of a year or 2 or 3. This isn't really where the money is, so let's move on and look at some other issues. First, there's lost revenue from bounces alone. What that means is that if that 5% or 10% of those emails were good emails, there's opportunity for you to make money there. If your list is only 90,000 big versus 100,000, then you can make less money when you kind of factor in what you convert at and also what the lifetime value is of a customer. The really awesome thing about data validation is that we provide services both in real time and in bulk. So what that means to you is that you can clean up your historical database, which will give you the ability to save money. But when implemented in real time, we give you the ability to prompt the user at the time of collection and recuperate email addresses that otherwise would be lost because they're entered wrong. So let's just look at a simple example, and I know that everybody's going to have access to the presentation afterwards, so you'll be able to plug in your own numbers. But we'll keep the list size of 100,000, and we'll assume a conversion rate of 2%. of the emails that are delivered, and a lifetime value of $100 for acquiring a customer, and our bounce rate of 10%. So that tells us that if we take the 10,000 emails that we would have bounced, and those emails convert at 2%, we've potentially lost $20,000. And it's hard to put a time frame on this because it depends on how frequently you deliver and how long it takes for that 2% conversion to actually materialize. But nonetheless, there's a lost revenue potential of $20,000 in this scenario. And for other people, it might be higher or lower percentage-wise. You might have a very low conversion rate, but a high lifetime value. What matters is the principle. And the principle is that without validating and recuperating those leads, whatever percentage you would have converted at is money that's lost and basically goes down the drain. So keep that in mind, and when you have time, plug in your own numbers or talk to us to help you do an analysis of your particular business model and how email is impacting it. But it's something to keep in mind. The second one is lost revenue from just bad email deliverability. Like we talked about earlier, there is an impact that happens in terms of your ability to deliver email both to the inbox and just to get it into the ISP the minute you hit certain thresholds. So if we take the same scenario and we have the same list size and same conversion rate and the same lifetime value, but we now speculate that our delivery ability is reduced at particular ISPs, from 5 to 30%, because we are unable to deliver because of bad reputation. We could be losing 60,000, 70,000, whatever amount of dollars based on the conversion rate and the actual impact, but a lot of money basically that we're just throwing out the window because we're having that impact. So a lot of times you'll look at things like click-through rates or conversion graphs, and there'll be big dips at particular points in time. And if you look, they may correlate to big dips at particular domains, and you won't know why. It's because your reputation and your deliverability potential is being affected by that bad data, and you're losing a lot of potential revenue because of that bad deliverability. So basically, it's the deck is stacked against you if you're not validating properly. And if we kind of look at it and you say you start out with it's $100 for the bounces, and it's potentially losing $20,000 and potentially losing $60,000, and those numbers are going to differ from business to business, but you can see that the amount of money that you can potentially lose is just growing by orders of magnitude. So just keep that in mind. But the other thing to really understand is that it impacts the way that you do your job. As a marketer, as a sales professional, you have expectations, and you're expected to improve results year over year. Basically, we're expected to have earnings graphs or marketing graphs that look like the one in the presentation, where it's going higher and higher and higher. However, your data is deteriorating faster than your marketing returns are improving. So, like I said, the deck is basically stacked against you if you're not aware of that. And let's do a little more math and see what that looks like. So the average list growth, and this again is from a nationwide study of marketing companies or companies who engage in marketing, is 3.2% year over year, or actually month over month, I'm sorry. So that means that you're growing your list by 3.2% through different activities. And that's the good news. The good news is that on average, we're performing pretty well. If you compound that over a year, that's actually a phenomenal growth from a marketing standpoint. The bad news is that all the things that are taken away from that are also very staggering. So your average decay rate, which is just coming from people changing their email addresses over time, or accounts expiring, or whatever it might be, is 2.3%. You then have to deal with things like an average unsubscribe rate, which is people unsubscribing for your list. You have to deal with the bounce rates that come into play for whatever reason, and then also things like diminished delivery because you've hit certain bounce thresholds and you're unable to deliver at optimal results. So when you kind of do that math, and these numbers are going to vary, you're going to see that no matter really how you play it out, your average list growth is always going to be less than the compounded total negative effects. So in this particular scenario, your actual list growth on a monthly basis is negative 5.35%, which means to get to zero, you'd have to increase your list acquisition or your marketing results by 5.35%. And to just hit the national average of 3.2, you'd actually have to have a growth of somewhere, 8 to 9%, which compounds to something like 100% year over year. So like I said, it's stacked against you. When you start to take things out like bounces and recuperating the leads because of real-time validation on the web forms, all that stuff in red goes away. So your efforts aren't being negated by all these negative effects. So it affects, like I said before, the way that you do your job and the way that you're perceived. Because, as I explained, delivery to a bad email address is always zero. And if 10, 15, 20% of your list in a year is bad, that's 20% you never had a chance at delivering. And that's going to really impact the way that your performance looks and your marketing results look, and it's going to skew the way that you make decisions and that your organization makes decisions. So here's the good news, and this is the last slide basically, and we'll take questions after this. But the good news is it would have cost $1,000 to validate that entire 100,000 record list. So if we do a little bit of mental math, we'll realize that we're very well north of $100,000 that's been wasted to this point. And the investment to get rid of all those negative hidden costs would have been basically about $1,000. Actually, probably less. I think Eloqua customers through Sureshot get a discount. So in the long run, really, the investment that you have to put in is minimal, but the benefits are just staggering. So I know there's a lot of numbers, but I want you guys to just keep that in mind, that there's a lot of hidden costs in there, and take the time and plug in your own numbers from your own organizations and find out what the hidden costs for your particular organization and how that data is impacting you. And as I said before, feel free to reach out to us by email and Twitter, and we'd love to help you in kind of figuring this out and getting some best practices in place and some validation into your system.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Mike. I'm going to go ahead and take the presentation back. Now, we'll go ahead and let's go through kind of some Q&A. I know that Chris had a question. He asked, does Eloqua not identify bounce rates as well as your product? Mike, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, definitely. So basically, the first thing you need to understand about that is that even if a system is 100% accurate in reporting a bounce rate and detecting the bounce, once you've done it, it's too late. That bounce is going to have a negative impact, even if it's just even if you just take into account the cost of initially emailing that bad email and then the reputation issues that it might cause. It's a huge impact. And then secondly, Eloqua is awesome, but no system is perfect. And so adding an extra layer like data validation gives you two major things. And one is having better bounce prevention and reporting, and the other is getting rid of those negative effects of the cost of the actual delivery and the negative reputation, which impacts your overall ability to get good return on investment. So it's not an issue that Eloqua is bad in any way. It's an issue that, no matter how good they are, once you've done it, you've done it. And just knowing that you've done it doesn't take away the pain of what those negative effects are.
All right. Are there any other questions? It doesn't appear that we have any. So things you can do today, some of the takeaways that we can apply is one thing that we always tell our customers is highly important, even going into as you start, for new Eloqua customers and even people who have been Eloqua customers for years, is you need to have a consistent data management strategy. We have a link here. You can go and check that out on the Eloqua blog. But having a data management strategy really helps when it comes to how you're going to approach bad data that's already in your system, and also how you're going to prevent bad data from coming into your system in the first place. For a lot of organizations, that cost comes too late. That they're being reactive to bad data. They're being reactive to the cost, whereas you can be proactive and prevent those things. Secondly, Mike touched on it, determine the age of your data. It's good to go through and just see how much of your database has been in there for 6 months to a year to 2 years. Some databases go back 5, 6 years. So it's good to go through and determine the age, and then determine your Cinder score. There are some organizations that we come across that they don't even realize that they have a Cinder score, and they just kind of blast emails. You can go to cinderscore.org, and you can put in your IP. You can find out what your email Cinder score is for your organization. And then, as we like to call it, the shameless spark plug, because we have a great sense of humor here. But we have a product that we've developed with data validation to really present Eloqua customers with this service. So we have a cloud connector that if you want to run your entire database through data validation service, you can do that in a program in Eloqua. We also have a cloud component that you can pull onto forms, and in real time it will validate those emails and prevent them from coming into your database. It really increases the value of your Eloqua investment. We have lots of different partners that do different things to help you manage data as far as validation or appending or any of those things. And then we have some upcoming webinars with more of our partners. We have Get Smart Content next week. They're going to be speaking on how you extend the influence of your marketing campaigns. And then the week after that, we'll be meeting with Demandbase, and they're a large-scale data provider, and they have an excellent service, so you won't want to miss those. And then if you want to contact us, feel free to email me. Once again, my name is Ryan Reichen. It's ryan.reichen@sureshotmedia.com, or you can check out our company on Twitter. We're at SureshotMedia. Mike Marion, they have an email set up, info@datavalidation.com, if you want to reach out to them, or you want to know more about their product and what they do, their service. And you can follow him on Twitter at Mike Marion. And that'll end today's presentation. So thank you all for coming. We appreciate you all being here, and hopefully we will see you next week.